All right, welcome to another deep dive. Gotta say, when you sent us all this stuff about MicroStrategy, I was pretty intrigued. Business intelligence and Bitcoin. It's not exactly the most obvious pairing.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Definitely an interesting combo. We usually think of MicroStrategy as this data-driven company helping other businesses make sense of their information, and suddenly they're going all in on Bitcoin.
And we're not talking about like a small investment here. I mean, you sent over some reports showing them holding over 150,000 Bitcoins by the end of last year. That's a whole lot of digital currency. What's the driving force behind this strategy?
Well, a lot of it comes down to one person, actually, Michael Saylor. He's MicroStrategy's executive chairman, really the mastermind behind this whole Bitcoin play. He's convinced that Bitcoin is, as he calls it, digital gold, a real hedge against inflation.
Okay, digital gold. I feel like I've heard that phrase before, but to be honest, I'm not sure I entirely get it. I mean, it's not like you can hold a Bitcoin in your hand, right? You can't exactly bite it to see if it's real.
Right, it's not a physical thing like gold, obviously, but the idea is this gold, traditionally it's been a safe haven asset. It's scarce. It has what some people say intrinsic value. And Saylor believes Bitcoin kind of shares some of those same characteristics.
So limited supply and the fact that it's decentralized, nobody really controls it, right? No single government or institution.
Exactly. So in Saylor's view, it's got the potential to be this really stable store of value, maybe even better than traditional assets, especially with all the economic uncertainty in the world right now.
Interesting. But, okay, how are they even funding these massive Bitcoin purchases? I mean, 150,000 Bitcoins, that's got to be a hefty price tag.
Well, to do that, they've been using a pretty interesting, maybe controversial strategy, selling equity in the company to raise the money.
So like issuing new shares.
Exactly. And that has some downsides, of course. The value of existing shares gets diluted. But on the plus side, they avoid taking on more debt.
I see. Yeah. No debt's always a good thing, but diluting shareholder value, that can definitely be risky, especially if the whole Bitcoin market takes a nosedive.
Oh, absolutely. It's a high-risk, high-reward kind of play. If Bitcoin skyrockets, their investment could pay off big time for shareholders. But if Bitcoin crashes, it could really hurt their financials and, yeah, shareholder confidence. And then there's this whole other layer of uncertainty. Regulation. Governments all over the world, they're still trying to figure out how to deal with cryptocurrency. Any new rules or regulations, that could have a massive impact on what MicroStrategy is doing.
It does feel like the landscape's constantly shifting. Yeah. One minute a country's cracking down on crypto, the next they're embracing it. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
So how can a company like MicroStrategy even navigate that? I mean, it seems like such a moving target.
It is. It's a tough balancing act. I mean, they have to be aware of any potential changes, stuff that could limit how they buy, sell, or even just hold their Bitcoin. But they also have to be flexible, ready to jump on any opportunities that come up. Like if a Bitcoin ETF gets approved, that could be huge.
Right. So it's not just about avoiding risk. It's about being ready to seize the right moment when it comes along. But I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, shareholder confidence. How are MicroStrategy's investors feeling about all this, putting so much faith in Bitcoin?
It's actually been pretty divided. You have some shareholders who are really enthusiastic. They see MicroStrategy as being ahead of the curve, almost like visionaries,
Yeah.
They really believe in the long-term potential of Bitcoin and see MicroStrategy as the best way to capitalize on that.
I can see that, especially for those who are already big believers in Bitcoin. But what about the investors who are a little more, cautious? The ones who might see this whole strategy as kind of reckless.
And they're not wrong to feel that way, right? I mean, there's a lot of inherent volatility with Bitcoin. And concentrating so much of the company's assets in one place, even if it's digital, that's a pretty big gamble.
That's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
Even if you buy into the whole digital gold idea, isn't it just too risky to put all your eggs in one basket? Even a digital basket.
It's definitely a question worth asking. And it's really at the heart of this whole MicroStrategy experiment. Can they manage the risks, prove that this big bet on Bitcoin will pay off, or will it backfire? That's the million-dollar question, literally.
It's a real high-wire act. Huge potential rewards, but some serious risks too. And it's not just MicroStrategy, is it? We've seen other companies like Tesla and Block dipping their toes into Bitcoin. But MicroStrategy, they really jumped in head first.
Yeah, no kidding. They're not messing around. They're leading the charge, showing everyone what it looks like to really go all in on Bitcoin. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, well, we'll have to see how it all plays out.
It's a fascinating case, isn't it? Almost feels like we're watching a financial experiment in real time. Lots of data points to consider. What would you say are the biggest takeaways from MicroStrategy's Bitcoin adventure so far, especially for someone like our listener who's really been following this closely?
Well, regardless of whether MicroStrategy ultimately sinks or swims with this Bitcoin bet, I think the main takeaway here is cryptocurrency, it's not some fringe thing anymore. It's here to stay. It's changing the whole financial world, and every company, big or small, they have to pay attention.
Ignoring it isn't really an option anymore, is it? But what does that even mean for most companies? Are we all supposed to just follow MicroStrategy's lead and go all in on Bitcoin? Is that the takeaway here?
Well, I think that's where things get tricky. What MicroStrategy is doing, it's bold, really bold. And frankly, it's just not the right move for most companies. There's no one-size-fits-all approach here, you know?
So what advice would you give to those companies that are kind of intrigued by crypto but also pretty nervous about the risks? Where should they even start?
Honestly, I think the first step is education. Really getting a grasp on what cryptocurrency actually is, how it works, the potential benefits, and all the risks that come with it. You also got to assess where your company stands financially. What's your risk tolerance? Where do you want to be in 5, 10 years?
Makes sense. It's not about blindly following the hype or trying to copy what MicroStrategy's doing.
Exactly. It's got to be about making smart decisions, decisions that fit your company's overall strategy. And got to remember, the crypto world, it changes fast. What looks like a great bet today could be a disaster tomorrow. You got to stay nimble.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. We covered a lot of ground. The whole digital gold philosophy, the challenges with regulation. It's a lot to process.
It really is. And for our listener, I think the key thing to remember is the MicroStrategy story, it's a valuable lesson, whether it ends in triumph or tragedy. It shows the promise and the pitfalls of bringing cryptocurrency into the corporate world.
It's a story that's still unfolding, too. It's going to be interesting to see what the next chapter holds for MicroStrategy and for Bitcoin. Will their gamble pay off? Or will they regret it? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, it's a story worth following, and we'll be here to break it all down for you along the way. Thanks for joining us.